and the lessons we can learn as Alaskans. I'd like to start our evening with a land acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge the original inhabitants of this area, the Dena'ina people. The land that Anchorage is situated on is the traditional, sovereign, and unceded land of the Dena'ina. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the Dena'ina people, past, present, and future. I also want to thank our community partners because events like this take a lot of planning, and we could not do it without this wonderful community, which this time includes Move to Amend, Anchorage Public Library, Alaska Common Ground, and American Promise. But I also want to thank all of you because everyone here shared and told their friends about this event, and that really helps make things successful. So thank you for coming, and thank you for sharing the event. And just a few things to go over. This is a Zoom meeting. All microphones are muted to eliminate background noise. Select the speaker view for the best viewing experience, and go ahead and introduce yourself in the chats. Questions and comments can be entered into the chat. If you direct them to Alaska Common Ground host, they'll be able to put your questions into the queue. And of course, this meeting will be recorded, so if you'd like to come back to it at a later date, you'll be able to find that on Alaska Common Ground's YouTube site. And inappropriate conduct will result in removal, but I'm sure that's not going to be a problem tonight. So I would like to introduce tonight's moderator, Bill Hall. Bill Hall comes from us from Alaska Common Ground, and I want to thank you so much for taking the time to host this chat.
Thank you, Stacia. Is my volume loud enough so everybody can hear it really well? I'm getting no response. Okay, thumbs up. Okay. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming. And before I get going, I'd like to acknowledge the people who made this possible tonight. That's Bev Churchill, Stacia McGordy, Sharman Haley, and Kari Gardy, and myself. Kari and I are with Alaska Common Ground. And Kari is going to be managing the background technology for us. So as Stacia said, we will begin with all of you muted. After we begin, you will be able to control your own mute function. Please turn on your video when it is your turn to speak if you have not done so earlier. Please use chat to tell us you would like to speak by typing "my turn" or click on the raised hand symbol in Zoom. Kari, our Zoom manager, will assist me in maintaining a list of those who have requested to speak. She'll be assisted by Stacia. Please refrain from using chat for any side conversations, as it will make it difficult for us to find your requests. They can get lost in the chatter. Try limiting your speaking time to 1 or 2 minutes. I think we had over 60 people registered for this, and if everybody got a one minute to talk, that would be 60 minutes. So you can go over, but be conscious of the limited time. And there will be no repeat performances until all have had an opportunity to talk. And finally, ground rules. I would hope that you can all agree with this, that I will be concise in my statements so others have time to participate. Be respectful of others, listen to learn, speak to share and inform. So with that, I would like to introduce our topic tonight, and it is a discussion or dialogue on the documentary, I guess it's The Color of Money, about dark money. And we have at the beginning a succinct statement by the director of that film, which I think captures what this is all about. And that statement is, dark money is any money in an election where you can't tell where it's coming from. When that money is anonymous, it makes it very easy for that money to have a corrupting effect. So we have these discussion questions for you. They're optional. The ones at the bottom are suggestions that you might want to use, or you can choose your own question. I would like most of you, if you can, when you start, spend just a few moments in saying what did you learn from the film, or what was valuable to you from the film? You don't have to be exhaustive about that, but just give us an idea, sort of set the context into what interested you in the film and what brought you to our discussion tonight. So I think we're ready to begin. So the sample questions are listed before you. And I guess we're open right now for people who want to speak. So indicate if you want to speak on the chat function, and Kari will let me know and we'll go from there.
And just a reminder, you can raise your hand in the, there's an option to raise your hand in the participants, or you can put that you'd like to speak just in the chat bar. At this point, we've, looks like Beverly would like to say something.
I'm still trying to feel comfortable with the technology, so sorry about that. I have always had a passion for this issue. Once my eyes were opened about the flood of money in our politics, but this movie, and I haven't read the book, but this movie blew me away in how well it documented an example, and Montana had been held up to me as an example because of their long history with corporations. But I really didn't understand that until I saw the movie. And what also blew me away was how much I identified with it, being in Alaska, how we are such a big resource-rich state with a small population, with citizen legislators, and we are just now, I think this year, really feeling the tsunami of outside money coming into the state. And so I'm hopeful by watching this film that things can get better and things can be addressed. Thank you.
Bill Sharman would like to say something.
Yes, Sharman, please do.
All right, there's my video. I guess what impressed me most about the film, I'm familiar with the whole issue of dark money. I'd never seen this movie before, and I've been concerned about this in the Alaska context for about 8 years. And it seems to me that our Montana fellow citizens are way ahead of us in tackling this issue, in stepping up. And I would like to see that same level of citizen resolve in this state. You know, I hear people talking about it, but not across the board. And I've been in particular trying to talk to Republicans about this issue for the last several years. And while I hear them privately, you know, say, yeah, it's an issue, I never hear anyone motivated enough to actually make it a priority issue.
Thanks, Sharman. Who's next, Kari?
Mim.
Evening, everyone. I was really impressed with the movie. It was really interesting. One of a question that came up in my mind almost right away from towards the beginning of it is, if assuming ballot measure 2 passes, is it likely that that the dark money part of that is going to be challenged in court? Do we know?
Well, as the moderator, I'm particularly neutral on this. You might even say I'm ignorant. So somebody
Okay.
else on the panel might want to answer that.
Good to know.
And we don't have the, there's some folks from Yes on 2 are going to join us, but I don't see them yet. Sharman or Beverly, do you have or Azar, do you have a response?
All I can tell you is that from my conversations with Jason Gren, the ballot measure was designed to pass constitutional muster because he knew in drafting it that it would never get through the AG's office if it wasn't very carefully crafted to navigate the current contours of the Supreme Court rulings, which is exactly why even if ballot measure 2 passes, that's just the beginning. We have a lot more work to do.
Azar would like to respond to.
Sure. Go ahead, Mim.
Yeah, I would
Raise a
reiterate. Great. Yeah, I would reiterate Sharman's answer to that really good question, Mem, and say, the thing that most interested me about the movie was, they gave the example of Montana's state law that they created in 1912 related to corporate contributions, and how the Citizens United case specifically deemed that unconstitutional, and Montana was the only state that pushed back, and they have that really deflating conclusion where the state of Montana with Steve Bullock challenged this. It gets all the way to the Supreme Court, and they like a slap on the wrist say in half a page that no, this is a free speech issue now. To me, that was just the most galling example that they did a powerful job displaying. And a couple scenes later, they have Trevor Potter saying, well, one thing that we're going to see is people just don't think that money is free speech, and there's going to be well-funded opposition, but there's going to be people in mass across the country working to fix this. And they follow with the ballot initiative in Montana. And across the country, this is what we've seen, and particularly after 2010. So that's what encourages me in what we've seen transpire since 2010, and why journalism like this is getting more and more attention. And what I think is a big opportunity in Alaska. Agree with Sharman that ballot measure 2 is not the end all, but it's a really good step in the right direction.
Thank you, Azar. I know some of you who've spoken might want to speak again, but I'll put you on a list and let you come back on once other people have had an opportunity. So, Kari, anybody else want to speak now?
Not at this moment. I don't see any raised hands or in the chat.
Okay, well, Mim, would you like to, I saw you put your hand up. Would you like to say something?
I was just doing a thumbs up, thanking Sharman for her answer. I'm good for now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, what about some of the optional questions? If some of you haven't any questions of your own, anybody curious about the optional questions?
And just a note, I put them all in the chat so people can scroll back through the chat and find them.
And for those of us who've just joined us, so you probably didn't get to see the procedures list, but the manner in which you get an opportunity to speak to us is you indicate that you want to speak on the chat function, either typing in your name or using the symbol that Zoom gives us with a thumbs up. So please do that.
Or raise your hand if you know how to do that.
Yeah,
John would like to say something.
good.
Hey, you might mic unmiked or in mic'd. John Sonnen, I have been on this issue since 1985, since the Stockman-Reagan fiasco, Reaganomic fiasco of Citizens United got its start. I am sorry to say I didn't see the Montana documentary or video, but I've been fighting against the inhuman soapboxes that big money has when it comes to preaching in the case of our current political situation, a mongering of fear that capitalism is built on to begin with. It's all about getting your way, not necessarily doing the right thing. But when Stockman's OMB department in 1985, so I was involved with Public Citizen probably since 88, 89. When he convinced a deluded Congress, simply because they were more about party than about policy, and to believe in that money was speech. My, at that time at least, mollified and muzzled voice in 1985 prevented me from stopping that. I can't remember the bill that started it, but it was based on that supply side scam. That then allowed the Supreme Court to pass the Citizens United. Once it was, at the time it was passed, though, I knew it was wrong. I just couldn't say anything. Wasn't really able to say anything about it. I didn't have the voice to try and stop it. Just recognized how inane it was. And now, since probably...
John, could you sort of wrap it up so we can give other people a chance?
Sorry, since probably in the 90s, been involved with Move to Amend. We got American Promise is kind of popular up here too. All about a 20th Amendment to clarify the distinction between a human voice and one built entirely on profit, because that is the problem. And that's what gives voice to the Citizens United decision, or enables the Citizens United decision, and then subsequent Shelby and whatnot to solidify this insanity. It's just created the whole.
That sounds pretty good, John. You want to give somebody else a chance?
I'm so sorry. All right, Bill, I can wrap it up there and just say, I wish I'd seen the movie about Montana. I hope they've got something really strong going, and I'm all behind, all around, or I'm all behind yes on 1 and 2 for this election.
Thank you. Thank you.
I
Oh,
think
you had
Beverly.
somebody else.
I think Beverly had a hand raised.
Okay. Beverly?
Yeah, I'm trying to get my video going here, so I don't like being a voice out of the darkness. At least you can see who's talking. So when we bring this all home to Alaska, one thing that I don't know if all the people on this discussion are aware that we have had some very strong campaign finance laws as well as Montana, but they were passed much more recently, and they have been under assault as well. They have been taken to court over and over again. We don't know if they'll be taken to court again. They might just keep going up until they feel that they can get it struck down. So, you know, I feel like the people of Alaska are being assaulted because they passed that law, and it's being chipped away at by these opposition forces. Also, you know, I get just really upset when I see this flood of money coming in from both sides. It doesn't matter. But I believe that we are choosing our candidates, our representatives, and somebody else shouldn't be influencing our elections. They should be, I mean, it would be like me going into let's say they were having a high school elections for, you know, on their campus. And I just charge in there and start, you know, working for one candidate that I want. Well, I don't belong to that campus. I don't have a right to go in there and, you know, influence their election. They should have a right to a free and fair election of their representatives. I had Jason Gren was actually my representative before he was voted out. And I'm not sure who paid for it. Maybe it was one of these dark money groups, but just days before the election, a flyer came out and it had him and this other candidate who was known as really not a reliable candidate at all. He's a little mentally deranged, shall we say. And they had a picture of him in this pea pod, and they put them together and said, just 2 peas in a pod. And Jason and this other guy have nothing in common, but he had no ability to make any recourse. You know, it was just like that example in the Montana film where, you know, and that's why the McCain-Feingold campaign finance law had a limit on when you could.
You're making some good points, but maybe we could make some time for other people.
Yeah, so those are some of my thoughts.
Anybody have any experiences like Bev? Kari, do we have anybody online?
Oh, there's nobody raising their hand or asking to speak in chat. It's a small enough group that we could, you know, people could probably chime in if they want to. Sharman had some comments she was making. I don't know if she wants to say those out loud, or if there's other people who want to speak, please go ahead and note that in chat.
It'd really be nice if you were interested in the film. It'd be nice to know why. What did you get out of the film?
And Dick Lefevre would like to chime in here.
Good.
Yeah, I really did enjoy the film. I almost made it to the entire end of the video, but I had to stop to take another meeting. I started at about 5 o'clock, but I didn't quite get to the finish. But I'm from Montana, actually, originally, but that was over 40 years ago. And Montana, as many of you know, is often compared, or were compared to Montana. We're both heavy industry, rural, spread out, fairly conservative state with pockets of blue here and there. My thought about the film, Bill, and it's an excellent video, is really there. I think there has to be a groundswell from, you know, common folk, electing people to assemblies, legislatures, and combating this from the ground up. And Bill, as you know, and maybe others know from the book Democracy in Chains, the far right has had a well-orchestrated movement for years, even going back to the Goldwater days, of doing exactly that, of putting grassroots, putting money into grassroots efforts and getting assemblies, library boards, you name it, into the conservative camp so that they can make substantive policy changes. And the progressive or the left or the liberal or whatever else that might be antithesis to that, we've lagged behind. So we need a good ground game. And I think this video exemplified what Montana tried to do. In fact, I signed up for the Montana Free Press, and now I'm getting it and made a donation to them. So giving them a little bit of support. So I like what Alaska Common Ground's doing. I like what you're doing, Bill, and people here, I think, probably feel the same way. We need to get that kind of money out of politics, and we need to band together and collaborate, coordinate, and elect people that are going to help move this ball down the field.
Thanks, Dick. Anybody else?
Sharman.
So far, of the participants in our conversation here, we all sound to be like-minded. And since I've been working on this for a few years, I can tell you we're dead in the water until we get some conservatives, our conservative neighbors, to stand up and get actively concerned about this. This primary election, I know that 2 years ago, there was some dirt on outside money in some Fairbanks campaigns. I don't remember the details of, who was being targeted. My grief this primary cycle is that Senator Coghill, who's a longstanding Alaska statesman and a impeccably credentialed conservative, I enjoyed talking to him last year about this issue, and he's very thoughtful and open to the whole concept that these need to be legislative-based deliberative policy decisions, not court-based fiats. But he did not win his primary. He was up unseated when only 6% of the registered voters in that district were voting in the Republican primary for that district. And they voted for a completely inexperienced, truck driver who promised, the radical approach to permanent fund dividends. And we've lost one of the conservative voices who could have been an ally on this kind of issue. And I'm wondering if anyone in this audience knows anything about who's been funding these, these ultra conservative Republicans who have zero political experience and zero political standing. And if anyone here has ideas about how we're going to make this a Republican issue, make this a conservative issue in this state. It's not that they don't, that the people of my generation, they get it.
Let's give somebody a chance to answer that. That's a good question. How has dark money had an impact on Alaska? Well, we've got 21 people participating right now.
Donna has raised her hand.
Good. Go ahead, Donna.
Hi there. This is Donna. I'm calling in from Homer. Really enjoy Common Grounds. One of the things that startled me was I guess it was 2 years ago when Governor Dunleavy was parading his proposed budget around Alaska, and it was all funded by Americans for Prosperity. And that to me was really shocking. And to actually enter the room to be able to hear him speak about the budget or to ask him questions about it, you had to sign up. And basically it was, you know, Americans for Prosperity could then use your name. And so that to me was very alarming. I think it feeds directly into the perspective of dark money in our state. And I'm, you know, what I'm wondering, I mean, I don't have a solution. Well, it scared me, and I don't know what we can do about things like that. And I love what Sharman had to say, that I think that we do need to get, this needs to be an issue for all of us. And, you know, we had a representative elected here 2 years ago, over a seasoned legislator. And you know, she was funded in large part by the Republican Party itself. And, you know, so who was putting money into the Republican Party? So those are my thoughts. And thank you very much for this conversation.
One answer to your question, Donna, is we do have some time at the end of the discussion today on what can we do, and we have a number of people who are going to speak to that, so maybe we'll get some answers there. Any other examples of how you're concerned about this in Alaska?
I think Americans for Prosperity are the Koch brothers, and they took care of what's his name when he's running for the Senate for Baggett. Baggett's wanted his re-election. Baggett's re-election. They Koch brothers wiped him out. I think it was Americans for Prosperity. It's they're taking candidates on the right who are not Tea Party enough, Koch brother enough. That's another Koch brother creation. That and Fox News, I think. They and the Mercers.
Thanks, John.
That's the bet, although to get rid of those guys. When it comes to grassroots, so I organize is all we can do.
Yeah, thank you. Was there anything in the film that really struck any of you in a strong way? Was it where you had a strong reaction or a concern? Did we strike fear in anybody's hearts?
Azer would like to say something.
Good.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly touch on the question Sharman posed of, well, how do we get more conservatives active in this movement? And, you know, I think one of the most upsetting things to people across the political aisle is just the amount of money that's coming into Alaska from places not Alaska. There's a lot of interesting reporting. I'm, you know, looking at something from the Center for Public Integrity in 2014, 90% of the political advertisements came from the lower 48. And I think, you know, that type of communication about how our current constitutional interpretations is actually taking local control away from Alaskans and decisions being made for Alaskans is persuasive to people on the left and the right. So I would just emphasize sort of that line of rhetoric as being an effective way to sort of expand the conversation that sometimes I think can get siloed into you know, groups of people who don't need to be convinced. And as correctly identified, we need to expand the group of people who are thinking about these issues and seeing money in politics as a big problem that needs fixing.
Have we got to a point to where the film didn't even make us angry? Anybody want to speak to it? Well, here's a question for you.
Bill, I'll jump
What would
in.
happen if private corporations became more powerful than voters or political parties? Do we have that today in Alaska?
Say that again, Bill.
What would happen if private corporations became more powerful than voters or political parties?
Yeah, I think we're pretty close to that now. Witnessed by just this, everything on ballot issue number 1, whether it's state money or, I mean, people generating through donations from in-state or out of state. Corporate interests right now have, I think, having it tipping towards voting no on ballot measure 1, just because of the, what I call sort of a stair-step effect. If you're a subcontractor to anyone in the oil patch, you line up and genuflect, nod your head, and go along. To do otherwise would be, I don't want to say political suicide, but it'd be economic suicide. You would no longer be on the favored list. I've worked with oil companies as a contractor. I haven't been fired by oil companies, but I've saw others that were. I was working as a consultant, as you know, Bill, doing different kinds of work other than, how to figure out how to get oil out of the ground. But the message was very clear that if you did not line up, you were on the outs. And that goes for suppliers as well as people turning wrenches and other things like that. And the pay to play is pretty strong. We're a corporate state. I've also come, as I said, I came from Montana. And what was portrayed in that film, the big hole in the ground, it's there, it's lingering. It's a large Superfund site. I don't want to see those in Alaska. Who knows what might happen when things dry up and things start going away. I think we're going to be in a world of hurt unless unless at a grassroots level, we start taking action and electing people that can start changing these things.
Thanks, Dick. So where is the dark money in Alaska right now? Is there dark money coming in here, and what's it funding, if it is?
Frank would like to speak.
Yes.
Go ahead,
Who wanted
Frank
to
Fox.
speak?
Can you unmute yourself?
Who would like
I just
to?
did. I just finally did. I found the screen so I could unmute myself.
Perfect.
Anyway, yeah, I noticed I got one of those mailers, and I guess Tom Collier's a spokesperson for Pebble, or CEO, former CEO of Pebble Mine, spent a lot of money to influence this last election and remove some incumbents that were not fully supporting Governor Dunleavy, and that he ran a dark money, a subversive campaign to target the people that were not pro Dunleavy, and the ones that would actually would shake hands with somebody across the aisle. And so I think that's really bad, because it's going to make other people afraid to do it. There is a clear message that's being sent, like Bill was just saying, or Dick was just saying about being in the oil patch. If you talk the wrong way about, suddenly your bread isn't buttered the same way it was before. And you're going to maybe get greased and you'll be out of where you were. So it's a scary time, and it's all the dark money that makes it untraceable.
Thanks, Frank.
Jason, did you want to speak to some of the topics that have been raised?
Hi, everyone. This is Jason Gren. I'm here mostly representing ballot measure 2, the yes on 2 for better elections, but happy to answer a question if people have anything they think I might be able to answer or related to the issues in ballot measure 2.
Could you explain the part that deals with campaign finance, Jason?
I sure can. So ballot measure 2 has 3 main components, but the one that that we're discussing, you guys have been learning about tonight in regards to dark money. Really what it does is put a spotlight on the individuals who are donating to these super PACs and large groups that, you see on the bottom of a flyer or a TV ad, Americans for Apple Pie or Independence for America, American, loves oil, whatever it may be. What the ballot measure 2 would do is require that groups that are spending money in PACs who are registered to spend money on either on candidates, is that anytime that someone gives more than $2,000 to that group, whether they're an Alaskan, whether they're an outsider, whether they're a foreigner, whoever gives money $2,000, it requires that the group would have to disclose that individual's name within 24 hours of accepting the money. So if Steve Johnson from Dallas, Texas gives Americans for Apple Pie $2,000 and they're spending money in Alaska, they have to register that with APOC within 24 hours of the gift. And for us, obviously we can't limit the money. As you've learned and as you're discussing, Citizens United allows for really an unlimited amount to be spent. That's people's freedom of speech. But what we have said in this ballot measure is that Alaskans deserve to know who the individual is. And so instead of kind of that Russian nesting doll of money, we will know who the direct source is if they've given more than $2,000 to said group. And so we think that will really help with the transparency and help with voter information.
Thank you, Jason. Anybody have any questions or thoughts about that?
Well, there's a couple of questions in the chat wondering about who's funding ballot measure 2.
Yeah, so on the pro side, the side that I'm a part of that's trying to get this enacted, a significant amount of the money is from outside, and that is not, it's been discussed a lot and it's not news, but what we've done with our ballot measure, our side of it is to be completely transparent and to show, really practice what we preach. And so if you go to the website, Alaskans for Better Elections, you can see there's direct links to all of the APOC reports, all of our filings, all of our money. It's got links to the groups who have given us money, links to those individuals that fund those groups. And so anyone who wants to know if Steve Johnson from Dallas, Texas, or Jason Gren from Anchorage, Alaska has given to these groups that are funding this measure, they can find out the individuals. And so that is public record, and it's shared on our website, which is not the current law, but we've have really tried to practice what we preach, like I said, and trying to just show that transparency and what would be required of the law if it was enacted. The group that is the opponent of this ballot measure, mostly funded through I think it's the Republican Council on Leadership out of Washington, D.C., and Americans for Prosperity, which you well know about. And so a lot of their money is coming from those two groups, and in addition to the Republican Party of Alaska. But what you don't know is who has given those groups money, which is legal under the law. And so those are the two sides of the coin on who's funding the pro and the opposition.
So it would seem, given the statement of the director of the film, who says that dark money, you can't tell where it's from, it's a problem. But it seems like she said it's when it's anonymous that it makes it very easy for it to have a corrupting effect. So contributions, campaign contributions, when they're visible, apparently don't pose the same threat.
Yeah, I think the main difference really is, if I'm the president of any group, we've talked about the oil industry or mining industry, but if I'm the president of a pharmaceutical company, and I'm concerned about the laws in my state, instead of doing kind of more transparent lobbying or a campaign where we would be front and center about something. You can create a super PAC, give money through them, and no one will know who is behind the group. Our ballot measure, we feel, would at least shine a light on the individuals giving money that is supporting candidates, and that's we think is an important step.
So one of the important parts of the Montana experience was the importance of the press and the journalists who stuck with it after his company was bought by the other side. So what do we have an active press in Alaska that gives us the information that would be useful to us?
I will say that I believe the press has done a pretty good job of covering where the money has been coming from, especially from our group over the past year as we've started this campaign last summer. Because I think it's relatively new in Alaska, the amount of money, especially since 2010 and Citizens United, before then we didn't see this sort of money. It was mentioned the Mark Begich, Ted Stevens race, the Dan Sullivan race. These are some of the most expensive races in U.S. Senate history, based on per voter. And it's because obviously, Alaska is kind of a cheap media market, so you can kind of flood $10 million in and make a big impact. So the press, I think, has done a good job of noticing this difference and noticing this big turnaround that's happened in the past 10 years. I don't know the impact, but I believe that it's been at least covered pretty well.
Thank you, Jason.
A quick note, if I can, there was some mention about regarding Republicans and how they might feel about this, or how do you get more conservative voices on board? And if dark money is universally pretty, do all the polling, you talk to people, most, I hate to say, most non-extreme Republicans and even are for some changes to this and some adjustments. Even even the opponents of ballot measure 2 have said, hey, we'd like to do something about this, but let's do it through the legislature, or let's do it differently, not through a ballot measure. And to them we say, look, it's been 10 years, the legislature is not going to change this. It's really hard sometimes to clean out your own house. But when you talk to Republican candidates, when you talk to your conservative friends, most people understand that there's too much money, there's too much anonymous money, and there's too much corporate money coming into these races where it's affecting policy and it's affecting the outcomes of those policies. And so I think there is especially maybe at a grassroots level, there is some broad bipartisan support for adjustments to dark money.
Bill, Donna would like to speak.
Good. Donna?
Hi, thanks. I appreciate your question, Bill, on independent journalism, and I think it's really super important. And just today, there's an organization on the Kenai Peninsula called Kenai Peninsula Votes, which is a nonpartisan, very grassroots, small group of people just wanting to get people to vote and help people understand issues. And today they had a little webinar on journalism and the importance of reporting to educate voters about issues on ballots. And it included reporters from Kodiak and the Kenai Peninsula. And one of the things that came out in their panel discussion was just the drastic reduction in the number of reporters at every reporting institution that was represented. So the Homer News, the Peninsula Clarion, the public radio stations in our area have all lost news staff over the last number of years. And so, and they also talked about the importance of taking time to report political stories, and that, you don't just send out a tweet. You've really got to investigate it, and you've got to provide context to whatever it is politically that you're reporting, so that that the people that you're trying to reach have an understanding of the nuance associated with an issue. And with fewer reporters, the Homer News has 2 reporting staff, and one of those is also the editor of the paper. And it's it's a lot to cover, and so we're asking a lot of journalists at this point in time, I think.
Do we have any independent journalists in Alaska? We got the newspapers, we got the TV stations, any other sources?
Sharman?
There are a couple conservative independent bloggers, the Landmine and Suzanne Downing. I think that we don't have enough independent journalism, and I think about that when I do my year-end contributions. I look for some journalism nonprofits that I can contribute to. But there's also a broader question of, where does the voter public go for information? I have been impressed with the quality of the debate in the letters to the editor and op-ed columns about the ballot measures and stuff, but I doubt that a very broad spectrum of Alaska voters reads those op-eds. And so it's not just a question of whether the journalism exists, it's whether it exists in a format where it actually reaches the public.
Actually, Beverly had her hand up first. Beverly, did you still have something you wanted to share?
Well, actually, it's a little, it was back a few topics. I wanted to ask Jason about the constitutional amendment that is called for in ballot measure 2, and kind of divert to that a little bit if you
can
could.
put
Well, before you go there, Dick, did you have something on the same topic of journalism?
Yes, let me, yeah, sorry, got involved with something here. It's not independent, but I have been reading and subscribed to the Anchorage Press, and it has a little bit different take. I'm not sure about the Daily News or the Fairbanks Miner or the Juneau paper or any of those, but I don't feel like there's a real progressive voice that's in the mainstream. I think you have people around the edges. I think Dermot Cole, when the Daily News was purchased, and a number of the what I thought good columnists left or were dismissed or were not invited to participate, went online. I read Dermot Cole. I think he's good. I started reading the Anchorage Press. The Daily News has brought in a number of good community like compass pieces, and also the letters to the editor and some commentary has been, I think, a lot more balanced recently than when they started out. But I do think that social media can play a role and fill that gap if we can stand using social media. Some of us probably more than others, me, for example. But I try to get a taste of all sides, if you will. So I think that's an incumbent on us to search for it. But I don't think there's an independent press, really, that has a strong foothold in Alaska.
Another person, Mr. Adderhold, is that correct? And then Beverly, we'll get back to you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, Wayne Adderhold, not Donna. Well, I think you've already covered it, but I'll admit I was guilty for years of just kind of taking the papers for granted. But when the Daily News went through its down turn, I bit the bullet and realized I needed to support somebody. So I've been subscribing to Dermot Cole's blog ever since, and he digs deep, and I think he subscribes to journalistic ethics, and he also cross-references others too, the landmine, etc. So there's not a lot, but I think there is that source for progressive.
Beverly, did you have something you wanted to share again? Or did you forget? You're on mute.
No, it's in the chat and I repeated it, my question about the constitutional amendment called for in ballot measure 2. I was asking.
And Beverly,
Yeah.
Beverly, this is Jason. Could you just remind me which one you're referring to?
Well, I read it when I read the whole text that it was calling for an amendment to the US Constitution, allowing, I'm not sure what the wording was, to be honest, but I saw something there. But was I misreading?
Yeah, I think no. There is. It calls for one. Obviously, it's. I'd say it's toothless without any sort of action from the legislature, but it does recommend the legislature take up the action to regarding Citizens United and reversing it.
So it just recommends that they're not going to be required, doesn't require them.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, just thank you for clarifying that. I think a lot of people don't know that that's even a part of it, but.
Well, we have some pretty important election issues on the ballot this November for Alaska. So what, do we have any concerns about dark money coming in there?
To the question at hand.
Have we seen dark money coming into Alaska this election season?
Bill, I don't know if Azer wants to speak to that, but he has his hands up, and then Frank has his hand up.
Good, thanks.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to speak quickly to the conversation Bev and Jason were just having about the component of the initiative about question 2, calling for a constitutional amendment. And that's part of the challenge is, well, you can't have a binding call for a constitutional amendment without winning the constitutional amendment first. The ballot measure certainly would help future efforts through the state legislature, for example, passing a statewide resolution, which I know, Bev and Sharman and many on this call have been productive on for the last couple cycles. And I imagine that work will continue. And the hope being, well, ballot measure 2 passes. Here's one more piece of momentum and evidence that Alaskans care about these issues, and we can pass a non-binding advisory resolution through the state legislature. 20 states across the country have done similar things, and that momentum can build up into votes in Congress, because of a constitutional amendment, you need 2/3 supermajorities in Congress to pass language that gets sent back out to state legislatures, where it needs to be approved by 38 states. And if there's something in 2021, say, that says, the Alaska state legislature is in favor of this amendment, then that ratification becomes a lot easier, and you've done that legislative education and that voter education. So I think that's the big value in this being, a small but still critical component of this ballot measure, which makes it really exciting.
Frank?
Yeah, this is kind of going back a little bit further than everybody else did. And I'm going back to ballot measure number 2. And I noticed that when people came out against it, that there for a while, the top contributors were Mark Begich and Sean Parnell. And I found that, a Democrat and a Republican both against it. And that makes me think back to one of Bev and I's favorite books, Mickey Edwards, The Parties Against the People. I've noticed that it's kind of a bipartisan issue to be against this ranked choice voting because they would lose their power and and so they get so entrenched into as far right and as far left as they can get, and sometimes they're not far. They get so it's about who wins and what they will support as opposed to what their constituents really need. And so I think that there's a fear that if this were to go through and the true center would be represented, that they would lose their power and all of their, political, through their political affiliations, and they would just be, representing the people, not one side or the other. And I can see, and maybe it would be cheaper, but and they wouldn't have as much sway. And so I've noticed that a couple of times with trying to get something done with healthcare, and some of the people that you would think would be, well, even in our own assembly, when our assembly, we've got a pretty good assembly, and it was said that with that many people that are progressive on the assembly, the fact they can't get anything done is scary. And I've seen that, I've seen that time and time again. You say, well, it's Mickey Edwards' book, Parties Against the People, is a pretty good one. And that just made me, when I was thinking about, Begich and Parnell being part of the same pack that was voting against Jason's ballot measure number 2. They were in the opposition. And I thought that was interesting.
So
that they could find anything to agree on.
So does the ranked choice voting have any impact upon dark money and how it's used?
Not directly. Really, one of the advantages of ranked choice voting that is it's more than just having maybe perhaps more people on the ballot, or not having to select the lesser of 2 or 3 evils. It really puts a cramp in gerrymandering, because if you can't predict what voters are going to do based on their voter registration only, it's really hard to do what you see more and more of is in gerrymandering districts to provide outcomes that lean certain directions. And so it's actually, that's one of the, I'd say, benefits, down the road benefits of ranked choice voting. But with dark money, it might push pause on some of it as some of these organizations and groups have to figure out a new landscape, but it won't. There's no direct causation to it.
Thanks, Jason. And is it possible when you speak again, could you turn your camera on, or if there's not a compelling reason why you shouldn't?
I can try. I've got kids in bed, and I'm in a dark room talking, but
Okay,
I'll try to move to the next room and see if I can do this.
Okay. It's just nice to have a face behind the voice. Well, there's a few of you who haven't spoken at all this evening. I'm wondering if anything that we've talked about has tweaked your interest, or raised your concerns, or something we haven't talked about that you'd like to talk about. Hey, thank you, Jason.
Well, I think I misspoke earlier. John again. I've been chasing after this since the 1980s, but that's what allowed. It was that. That's what started the downward trending along the Citizens United and Shelby after that in the 20s. But we do have to get a amendment passed clarifying, distinguishing what's human speech and what's money speech. But in the state level, if Montana's got something going on, I think we're gonna have to check out the movie sometime soon. I think we got something going here too right now. Yes, on 2 and 1.
Did Montana figure out a way to deal with the issue? What did they do?
I don't know the answer to that, but Sharman has some additional comments.
Good.
My comments are only if we're ready to move on to the question of what do we do next? Are you ready to go there, Bill?
Yeah, I think so. It's a little early, but I think it's a good idea. So let's do that. So
Okay.
who you and Beverly want to do a presentation on move to amend?
I'll let Beverly speak to what she's going to speak to, and I'll speak to what I'm going to speak to.
Okay.
We had an earlier comment about how we're dead in the water in Alaska until we can get some Republican or conservative leadership on this issue. And coming up next month on November 19th, we have a third event in this series that is designed to speak to the kinds of issues and themes that conservatives want to talk about, like states' rights and stuff. So I think that the bottleneck probably has to do with outreach. You know, my personal networks don't go very deep into, you know, the Matsu Valley, for example. So anything that people in this conversation can do to help us reach our Republican colleagues and engage them in this conversation, the event in November should be of particular interest to them.
Thanks, Sharman. Beverly, are you ready to give us a little bit of information about move to amend?
No, I wasn't really prepared, but I can say just generally, Move to Amend is a national organization that has been working for 11 years on this on a national level. They, what I like about Move to Amend is that it's a very grassroots organization. They don't have a lot of money, but they have people power. And so they support local affiliates in cities, communities, states around the country to do what makes sense in their communities. So we have been educating people. We have been working to get communities to pass resolutions, supporting a change to overturn this bad decision of the Supreme Court. And it's like preventative work. It's hard to measure. It's hard to know sometimes how effective it's being, but it's building. We know it's building, and I firmly believe that most people in Alaska support the idea of ending this runaway money in elections and disallowing the people through their legislatures, through legislative means to pass campaign finance laws. So we're excited to see the ballot measure too. We're excited to see what happens here. I have a lot of kudos for Jason and the whole group that he's working with. You guys have been working so hard to bring Republicans, to bring the Native community, all sectors of Alaska into the conversation. And that's exactly what is needed. And you guys have been doing it. So
I understand that Move to Amend has been working with community councils to get resolutions. What's the goal of that?
well, to build the momentum, we want communities to speak up. We have Sitka, Homer have passed resolutions. In 2018, the municipality passed a resolution, and last year, the Kenai Borough Assembly passed a resolution supporting these efforts. So when we go to legislators, we can say, your constituents want this. It's the people speaking. So it's the way a democracy is supposed to work, as far as I know.
What are you asking the legislature to do?
We want them to pass a resolution calling for an amendment to the US Constitution to clarify that corporations do not have constitutional rights, such as free speech, and that in fact, free speech is not connected to money, that money in itself, expenditures do not equate free speech. To me, it seems like an oxymoron that money would be free speech. But that we, the people, have a right to pass laws to regulate campaign financing, that we have the right to establish public funding of elections, and those kinds of things.
I understand that the process of amending the Constitution requires a certain number of states to pass. Is that, what do they do? Pass a resolution? And how many have done that?
Well, Azor outlined that very well. There are 20 states that have. Every election cycle, there's 2 or 3 states that pass a resolution. And so, you know, average, I don't know what the average is, but, you know, I think one of the easier amendments that passed was changing, it was the 16th Amendment, I believe, passing, oh no, wait a minute, 20, I'm wrong, 24th? Sharman, help me here. It was a more recent amendment that changed the voting age from 21 to 18, and that still took over 30 years. I hope this doesn't take 30 years, and in the meantime, we want to see other things happen, other measures taken at the state and local levels. So it's all working in concert. It's all working together to build that momentum. And in fact, many of the amendments to the Constitution did start with state actions.
Well, thanks, Bev. Azor, did you have anything you wanted to explain to us and share with us that you haven't already?
I certainly do, but I'll go after Carol, who I see has her hand up, and then I'll have.
I think you have your, Carol, you have your mute on.
Sorry. Right after Citizens United was passed, I was in a very small bookstore in a very small town in Western Washington. And in the window, there was a sign that said, "I will believe that corporations are people when Texas executes one." And that's kind of what we have to overcome. Nobody heard it, huh?
Thank you.
Yeah, if you don't like what's going on in our politics, just use your free speech to spend $100 million in the next election. And you can, then you can solve the problem with your free speech. That's $100 million that we all have. I'll be happy to talk a little bit about American Promise. I'm the state manager for American Promise, which is a single issue organization with the goal of winning a constitutional amendment to enable the reasonable limits of money spent in elections. As we've mentioned, constitutional amendments are enormous projects. They take 38 states to ratify language that Congress passes with 2/3 supermajorities. And the goal of Promise across the country is to make sure, one, we get a bill passed through Congress with the needed votes, and two, 38 states and their legislatures are ready to ratify that bill for the next amendment to the US Constitution. That's what we're working to build the state infrastructure for in Alaska. There's all sorts of interesting strategic work to be done, engaging members of the congressional delegation, engaging members of the state legislature, and most importantly, engaging community members with the information and sort of strategic direction of this can't only be an issue that people on the left are fired up about. People on the left have to be fired up about it, but people on the left have to be fired up about this with people in the middle and people on the right as well. So, I'd say if folks are interested in sort of talking more about what it means to be, active in American Promise, strategically working towards building a state chapter, please reach directly out to me. I'll put my email in the chat here. And you'll be among good company. It's been nice getting to know Sharman and Beverly just a little bit, and others who aren't on this call yet, but excited to be on this call and first and foremost to help ensure a successful ballot measure 2 in just a couple weeks here.
Thanks, Azor. I see we have a question from Sharman to Jason. She says, if ballot measure wins, what next? If ballot measure 2 loses, what next? Care to comment, Jason?
Sure, it's a great question. Ballot measure 2 came up really because of what we saw in previous elections in some of the, and frankly, in the governor's race, where it was going to be a 3-way race where people were scratching their head and not knowing, they didn't want to vote for a spoiler. They didn't want to vote for someone who was going to give the vote over to someone they really didn't like. And, people who were involved with that and kind of saw the outcomes said, what can be done? And that's really where the discussion for open primaries and ranked choice voting came in, because of just looking at the landscape. The dark money aspect came into it because of, again, really from the governor's race, especially, there was a lot of focus on money from, really from the Republican side of outside money and dark money. And so it was groups of people who are politically active going, what can we change? We Alaskans deserve better. And so the question of what's next, or regardless if we win or not, kind of what's the next move, some of it has to do with kind of just looking at the landscape and what Alaskans want. If there's more momentum and groups like this and talking about issues that are important to Alaskans, staying connected to people who, this is what they do professionally. This is what they do on the passion side. Having those conversations as an actual tangible issue. I don't know, what's next. I mean, there's a lot of issues out there that can be talked about. Constitutional amendments when it comes to redistricting boards, more independent redistricting boards, I think has come up. I mentioned gerrymandering and things like that. There's issues on voter suppression that people who have been excited about ballot measure 2 have asked about, how do we make it easier for rural Alaska to vote, and working with the division of elections to make it easier for people to vote. So there's lots of issues to take on. I think it'll end up kind of being like, what's the next, maybe a little bit of a groundswell, or what's the reaction after these elections to kind of gauge what can be done.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, does anybody else have any questions or comments they'd like to make at this point? We've benefited a lot. I want to thank Jason for being here, and Azor, and of course Beverly and Sharman have been very helpful. So
Dick has a comment.
Oh, good.
Bill and Common Ground overall, thank you for this program, this topic. And of course, we don't want it to stop here, do we? So whether or not there's more forums like this, Bill, or what Alaska Common Ground may have in mind, but I'm just wondering what we as a group that's left here might do on our own to move this even into more of the public eye, or what each of us can do individually and collectively.
Thanks, Dick. Well, one correction is tonight's event was essentially organized and conceived of by Beverly and Sharman, I believe. And we were fortunate that they asked Alaska Common Ground to join them in co-sponsoring it, which is one of the reasons why Corey and I are here tonight. So, yeah. So there are different groups that are interested in what's going on. And I don't know, maybe Azor or somebody else here could help answer that question. Probably we're looking at seeing what's going to happen in it's less than 2 weeks now, I guess, till we get to the election. Azor, did you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I would say 2.5 things. One, vote yes on 2. 2, attend that event Sharman mentioned, all about how to engage effectively with conservatives. I think it's on November 19th. We're happy to be participating in that as well. And the last half thing is, if you want to talk more in depth about any of this, feel free to reach out to me and I'd be happy to talk with you, but definitely do those first 2 things at minimum.
Good. Well, I think we're getting to the end. We do have a list of with the contact information for people that you can contact that Kari can put on the screen share in a moment here. So if you want information on how to follow up with Azor or Beverly or learn more about, there was an excellent, I brag a little bit about Alaska Common Ground. There's an excellent dialogue, debate on ballot measure 2 that was done here the last couple of weeks. And that's on our website. So if you go to the Alaska Common Ground website, you can get the information on how to get there. So Kari, can we flip that up there? Do you have it handy?
I've actually been putting it all in chat.
Yeah, okay.
So everybody should be able to see that in chat, although I'm happy to share. And I'm also putting information up on the November 19th event that's been referenced on where you can go get more information.
Okay.
But yeah, I can share the contact info.
Good.
For folks
Well,
as well.
while you're looking at that, I suppose, is there anybody that has one last comment they'd like to make before we call it a night?
Well done, Bill.
Well, we thank everybody for coming and participating. So it's been a big night for a lot of people, debates on the state level and the federal level and us. So I'm glad you took the time to come and participate in this. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
With that, I guess we can shut it down.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming. Thanks, Frank.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Susan.
Thank you.